Welcome to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you are ready to find your inner magic, develop great habits, and a rock-steady mindset to feel confident, comfortable, and fit in your body, you are in the right place. I am Kim Barnes Jefferson, and I'll be giving you weekly doses of health, fitness, and life tips sprinkled with humor and real talk. If you're ready to be consistent without the stress of perfection, magic makers, it's time to slip into your favorite pair of PJs, grab some coffee, kick back, and listen to today's show. Hey, Magic Makers, welcome back to another episode of the Fit Girl Magic podcast. Today, I am joined by an incredible guest, Dr. Megan Daly. She's here to challenge the norms of hustle culture and the perfectionism that so many of us feel trapped by. And if you are ready to step off the hamster wheel and find a way to live that actually feels good, keep listening. Dr. Daly is bringing her insights that are really going to help us realign with our true selves without feeling like we need a life crisis to make it happen. Today, we are diving into why is it that it takes a major life crisis for us to make a shift? Why doesn't it be we woke up on a day and we're like, you know what? I'm just sick and tired of hustling, grinding, and always feeling like I'm not enough. Dr. Daly is on a mission to help women break free of burnout by focusing on what feels good in your body, what feels aligned with what you're trying to accomplish in your life. We also talk about her Choose Your Day retreats, which really are all about how do we spend at least one day for ourselves to recharge and reset. You know, Dr. Daly also is here filled with actionable advice on how to set boundaries, maintain self-care, so that you just stop feeling chaotic. So don't miss out. Finish listening to this episode and do me a favor. If you found one insight, be sure to tag myself or Dr. Megan on Instagram and let us know what that insight was. All right. Enjoy the show, Magic Makers. This week's iTunes review is brought to you by ML Martel. She writes, 5 stars. Kim is more than just knowledgeable in just health and fitness. She is supportive, reassuring, and on the level. She gives it to you straight, just the way most people need it. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate that review. And you too can review Fit Girl Magic Podcast. Just go to iTunes or wherever you subscribe to this show and just leave me a 5-star review. I love them. I take them to heart. I just want to make sure that I'm bringing you the best stuff. So thank you so much for all of you who have left me a review so far. I can't wait to highlight you. All right, Magic Makers, I have Dr. Megan Daly here, and I'm really excited to have her on the show because one of the things she said that really got me interested in is that she works with women to really stop with the expectations, the hustle, the grind, all the things we think we need to do. And when she said that, I was like, who is this lady? I need to lean in because first of all, that was me. And I was like, I literally would beat myself up against a rock to get shit done. But I also see that in the women that I work with. I also see it in the posts that I see from other women in my age group, that if we are not productive, achieving, doing, why the hell are we alive? And Dr. Megan brings a different pace to this. And I really enjoy what she has to say because life isn't about the hustle and the grind. Life is about how can you get as much enjoyment, but still get the things that you want to do out of life. So Dr. Megan, please welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. And I love that intro, right? It's, and okay, so the movie reference I'm about to say, I've actually never watched Donnie Darko, but I'm fairly certain it's that movie that opens with the scene and he says Rosebud. And this has always stuck with me as soon as I heard about this scene and what it means. So imagine this movie about this like incredibly quote unquote successful millionaire, right? Like looked great on paper, checked all the boxes that everyone wants to try to hit as far as the family and $1 million and all these different like material possessions. And all he was reflecting on his deathbed was this sled when he was a little kid because it was the last time he actually remembers feeling joy.
Hey, Magic Makers, it is time to break up with all the BS dieting tips we held on to. I see you. You're doing all the right things, yet that belly fat still won't budge. You feel like your body RSVP'd for the struggle bus and forgot to invite you to the results party. I get that. Girl, it is not you. It's the outdated myths and habits you've been holding on to. Trust me, that was me. I've held on to a lot of things for over a decade. That is why I created the 24 myths to leave behind in 2024. This isn't some obvious drink more, sleep more, although you should. Advice. Nope. It is the real deal with truth bombs about what's holding you back and how to ditch it for good. Here's the kicker. You're not going to nail all 24 things. Perfection is so last season. Just pick 1 to 3 things and start to watch your progress skyrocket. Think about saying goodbye to that all or nothing dieting drama, breaking up with the punishing workouts, and ditching that toxic scale obsession. Sound like a plan? Let's make 2025 the year that you finally stop spinning your wheels and start seeing results that stick. So go grab your guide right now and start kissing those myths goodbye. Your future self is going to thank you, and so will your favorite pair of jeans. So go to the link in my bio, snag a copy, and be done with the fluff. Hey, DM me once you read it. I want to hear which myths that you are ditching first.
Sledding down the hill on this rickety thing when he didn't have money, right? And I think that's such a beautiful reminder of like, okay, if you were on your deathbed tomorrow looking back, like it's not going to be the accolades and the moments of hustle that you reflect on and be like, yeah, I lived my life full out. Those aren't going to be the moments.
Yeah.
So why are you living in a way that isn't in alignment with that?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I think some people, hopefully you don't come to Jesus on this, on your deathbed, but I think people come to Jesus with that, with, you know, a death of maybe a close friend, a parent, a loved one, where you kind of look at like, wow, they weren't able to achieve whatever. What am I doing with my life?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad.
It was meant for me.
Yeah. And it's sad that it's like, it takes that as your wake up call.
Yes. That's exactly it. That's literally like if we were able to kind of like distill like my mission down, it's so that women don't have to get to that kind of trauma.
Yeah.
In order to actually wake up to like, am I on my path? Mine, truly? Or have I just been checking the boxes and following the shoulds and the expectations and ended up with this life where, and honestly, a lot of us do this. And it's not even necessarily that we follow these arbitrary, like, yes, we follow the arbitrary boxes that society tells us to, but how we do that is a little bit more subtle in how it falls out of alignment. We follow, it's like, okay, cool, I can check the boxes, and then I want to do it by following this path that's expected of me by my parents or whoever it is, right? Like whoever's voice is consistently in your head. And we tend to find something that we do at least somewhat enjoy, but it's this like adjacent thing to what's actually our aligned path. But you get enough of those adjacent, right? You make enough of those shifts and all of a sudden you're 30, 40, whatever, looking in the mirror and you're like, why? Like, why does my life feel off? Like, how do I not 100% recognize the person looking back at me? And it's because all those little shifts add up to where like, and it's not the achievement drive that you have. It is not it's the alignment that's off.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we end up trying to make up for the fact that we're out of alignment because we don't really, like, we just know something feels off.
Yeah.
But we don't really know what. And so then we turn to what we know, which is hustle, drive, achieve, trying to make up the difference. But you can't make up that difference.
Yeah. No, everything you just said as you were talking, I was writing down. It's the checking the boxes. You know, it's like no one gets so much more satisfaction than anyone. But like, I checked that box. Like, it's done. It feels good. And
like, how good does it feel to cross something off your to-do list? Like, same thing.
It just feels amazing, and that like that little dopamine hit that you get, you're just like you're chasing that. But also the accolades you get, like, oh, I can't believe Megan can do all that in a day. Look, Yeah, and then you start to compare because you're like, oh, if Megan could do 500 things, I'm going to try to do 501.
Yep. And then you shame yourself on the days where you only have the capacity to do 5 instead of 500.
Exactly.
And I've had to work on this a lot over the last couple of years as I've kind of unraveled all of my old patterns, right? Like I also was the person, like I kind of alluded to this, my dad's death, I was actually his caregiver at end of life. Oh. So he was the person that was reflecting on his life. And it's like, he has this long list, like his obituary sounded amazing.
Right.
And he was looking back at his life being like, I didn't really live it for me. He never said those exact words, but I could hear it in everything that he said.
Yeah.
There's these moments, like his joyful moments were so far in the past because he'd gotten away from them, trying to follow this path of achievement and provide for the family and wait for retirement to actually enjoy.
Yeah,
and he got sick within a month of retirement.
Ugh.
And so I'm 30 being his caregiver because I lived across the country. So I immediately took leave and went back home because I was like, I can't be 2,000 miles away while you're dealing with this. And so it held up a giant mirror to me of like, oh, I look great on paper, but this makes sense why I feel like an imposter kind of when people are like, oh, you're doing so great. You're crushing it. Your life is amazing. And like, I'm like, thanks. But there's this like gut feeling inside of me that feels like an imposter because it doesn't feel like me. And until that moment, I wasn't willing to acknowledge or accept that. And that was the moment that really unraveled it for me. And I started trying to like poke the holes and find the gaps and figure out where I was off. And when I say that was like a whole journey on like unraveling so many patterns of perfectionism and people pleasing and not holding any boundaries and really deeply asking myself, like, who am I and what do I actually want when I take away all of like everyone else's voices that are in my head, clouding it with shoulds and expectations? Like, who am I when I strip all of that away? And it admittedly can be very tough to find. An analogy that I love to use with clients is you can't read your own label from inside your own bottle. And I can't do that for me either, right? Like what I do for my clients, right? Because I get to be the mirror that allows them to finally clearly see their own label and their own path. Like that is what I do. And I will be the first one to admit that I can't do it for myself because that analogy still holds true for me.
Right.
And so it took me years to unravel and figure all this out. I just happened to pick up a lot of tools and a lot of skills along the way to help others do it in a fraction of the time.
Yeah, and you're right, because I feel like part of us, we get stuck in the pride that like, I should
100%.
I should be able to figure this out. I could read XYZ book, or Megan can do it, so can I. Or it's embarrassment, like, why can't I get my shit together?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. The shame spiral that we can put on ourselves and the guilt trips that we can put on ourselves are so real.
I mean, it's harder than any...
Especially as the high achievers, right? Like the hyper-independent, like, don't tell me what to do. I can do it myself. Like, I don't need... Even if you've gotten halfway decent at accepting help, it's a little different when it is trying to answer the questions of like, who am I and what do I want? Because there is this perception of like, well, I should, again, shoulding yourself on like, I should be able to figure this out, right? Like it's me. But there's no shame at all in needing a mirror. We all do. And I think in general, the societal message that we get is this one of hyper independence, especially as females, right? Like you have to work twice as hard as the men to be seen, et cetera. Like all this messaging that we got, it turns into this need to try to do it on our own when we're not meant to do life alone.
Or maybe I got this far on my own and you're like, do I really need someone to get me to that next area? I figured it out.
Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. Yeah. It's very similar. I think of it almost parallel to what we talked about earlier of like, I know I can do 500 things in a day. Like I have proof of it. I have this one day that everything fell in line and I was able to really crush and my energy was high. And then we place that as like the gold standard on ourselves, even though
it's our benchmark day.
Yeah. Like But why do we do that to ourselves? Like, you wouldn't max out your lifts every day. I mean, you could, but it's not going to go well for you. Like, I'm a weightlifter, so that's like an analogy that works for me.
Most of the women who listen to my podcast are into fitness too. So,
okay, cool. Yeah. Like, if you go for a new PR every day, you're not going to hit a new PR every day. Right? Like, so it's playing with your energy. And then like, we're not even getting into like cycle and how our energy is supposed to ebb and flow. Right? But like, we put this benchmark day on ourselves. And what I have to keep checking myself on consistently, even now, after all the work that I've done, is when I try to be hard on myself, like, like, why am I not doing more? I know I'm capable of doing more. I know I can do, like, I've done it before, right? And I have to remind myself of like, okay, yes, but was I healthy? Was I truly like embodying wellness on that day?
Oh, my God.
And the answer is no.
Oh my God. Repeat that, please.
Yeah. Like, if you have this benchmark, Dave, like, I know I am capable. I know I could do all the things because I've done it before. And you have to reflect on, well, yes, but were you truly embodying wellness in those moments?
You know, it's like that. I'm going to pause this right there because you just said so much stuff right there. First, you know, for most of my women, we work out, and you're right. I see it all the time. I have my benchmark there. So it's like, I was able to work out, eat, blah, 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 blah. And then life comes at you and you're like, well, clearly I can only do it when the stars align. Right. So it's like, it's that all or nothing. Like, if the stars aren't aligned, then everything falls to hell. The second piece that you said was I must PR every day. Like, who is this independent judge that's like up here overseeing your life and being like, Megan, you did 50 pounds yesterday. What the fuck you thinking picking up 25 today? Like, who are you?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And it's like, then it's like, we don't look back to be like, oh, well, I didn't get a good night's sleep last night, so maybe going to the gym at 5 a.m. isn't a good idea. Or if I do go to the gym at 5 a.m., maybe today's not the day I'm going to max it out. And if that happens, I don't have to beat the crap out of myself because I got a bad night's sleep last night. Because sometimes we're women, I'm over 40. I don't get a good night's sleep a lot. I got kids. They didn't sleep last night. You know, whatever, life. You were thinking about all the things and you didn't get a good night's sleep. Like, but we don't go back to the sleep. We're like, it's 5 a.m. I go to the gym. What I do, who I am.
Yep. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, where it's that permission of being okay with not going all out, right?
Yes.
So maybe you do get up and go to the gym, but recognizing like, okay, my capacity is different today than it was yesterday, than it was last Tuesday, whenever, right? So what feels good for my body today, and allowing that to be true for you, no matter what anyone else says or expects of you. Because I will say, like, especially if you're in a gym where it's like a class that you're taking and you have this perception of someone who goes hard, like, being able to stand in your knowledge of yourself so strongly that if someone else in the class has some expectation on how hard you're going to push that day, you're able to just stay in your lane and do what's best for you.
All right. You said so many things again that were just, I think if I am a woman listening to this, first of all, you're not going to take every little thing here. I want you to find like one or two things that like just resonate with you, that just was that like, holy shit, she just saw me right now. Like, how does she know my life? Like, those are the intuitive hits that I want you to really like lay into. But the thing you said, my capacity. And I feel that so many women discount their capacity, and discount their capacity changes from season to season. You know, it's like, you know, right now it's where, you know, I could be moving into a season where my kids are elite athletes and I'm running all over the place, getting them here, there, and everywhere. So my capacity to do other things is pretty small, but I'm still going to beat the shit out of myself because I still think I should be able to do all the 500 things, plus get my kids all around, plus work, plus. Where once their season is over, I'm going to have a little bit more capacity, but I'm going to discount the fact that I'm helping my kids out. I like that.
Yeah,
that doesn't even count. That doesn't even like they're my kids. Like it doesn't even count. Like you're not even, in your scorecard of life, you're not even putting that even on the scorecard.
Exactly. Yeah. And it makes me think of, I don't know if you saw the Barbie movie, but the monologue that America Ferrera goes off on in there is what just came to mind. So for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, it really is just pointing at all of these expectations that we as women have taken on from society of give your kids 100%, but also give your job 100%, but also give your husband or your wife 100%, but also give, right? Like you don't have 800% in your tank, like at any given point. And so it's being able to recognize, okay, where's my capacity and what can I give to these different areas, right? Like where truly, and I think a lot of this comes down to being very honest with yourself about where your priorities are in this season.
Yeah.
And allowing the others to be okay. So I think of it like a spinning plate analogy.
Yeah.
You have all these different plates spinning in front of you on sticks, and you're trying to keep the speed up so that they don't just like crash. But at the same time, so like each plate, like one's mom and one's coach and one's business owner and one's wife and one's whatever it is, right? Like one's friends, all these different plates. And you have to recognize that there's only so many that you can actively be speeding up at one time. And you have to be okay with the others slowing down. And it's just being really honest about which few are getting your attention in that moment. Because if you keep trying to put your attention on all of them, they're all going to crash and burn.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's one of my clients uses the analogy called your burners, your 4 burners. And if I'm cooking something, like everything can't be on high because something's going to burn. So it's like, as we've all kind of prepped those like complicated meals, and then we like question ourselves, like, what the hell were we thinking with this complicated meal?
Yeah, we're like saw some recipe and we're like, oh, this sounds amazing. We get halfway into it and we're like, why?
Yeah, you're just like, I'm at this point, I'm done, but I'm like too far in that I can't stop. But she talks about the burners, and it's like we've all been there where you're looking around, you're just like, oh shit, like what like something's got to get.
Yeah, and I think like what I said earlier, it really is being very honest about your priorities, because so often we get really stuck in believing having a voice in our head, but we should also, right? Like whatever, fill in the blank there. But it's generally not your voice that's speaking. It's your mom's, it's society's, it's your second grade teachers. Like it's someone else's that has been placed on you. And now you're allowing it to bring up guilt and shame and whatever. So, and I love the example that you use as far as like, especially when you are responsible for tiny humans and they have schedules, and maybe that's the season that you're in a season where you're prioritizing that for them. And then being able to recognize that your capacity is less. It doesn't mean that you abandon yourself and you push yourself off to the side. That's the last thing you need to do. At the same time, recognizing what your capacity is and not trying to do all the things 100%, right? Like not going to having everything on the high burner. One thing that I will tell clients all the time is I honestly don't care how busy you are. Whenever you sit down and look at planning out your schedule, whether you do that monthly, weekly, doesn't matter. Go through, think of your capacity and think about what am I willing to commit, 100% commit to giving myself for self-care, and then put those blocks in your calendar and hold a boundary with yourself that those don't move, that those are non-negotiables now.
Yep.
Barring like someone being hospitalized, it's negotiable.
Yes.
And the key part that I said is being honest with yourself about your capacity and what you are willing to truly commit to, right? Like it doesn't need to be a 5-hour morning routine that you saw some influencer doing, right? Can you give yourself 5 minutes every morning? Can you give yourself 30 minutes, 3 afternoons a week? Like what is it that you are willing to set aside? It just can't be zero. And it also can't be so much that you're never filling your own tank.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see that a lot, that I just keep, I give. And you don't even like realize that your tank is like drain, drain, drain till you finally hit that lake.
I was that person all the time too, right? Like I would put the okay, I'm going to go camping on this day and I'm going to do breath work for 10 minutes on this day. And I'm going to, and then it just keeps life gets in the way and you keep pushing it on the calendar. And now it's been 2 months and you wonder why you're snapping at your friends and feel drained all the time.
Right. Yeah. It's our own self-worth, our own self-care doesn't have a gas meter on it to be like, hey, time to pull over. Although I feel that it probably does, and we ignore it. We kind of see the, we
100% ignore it.
Right. I'm that person who the gas light comes on in my car and I know I got 50 miles. And at that point, I turn on the meter to see how much further I can go before I truly have to pull over. And if I think about my life, that's who I am as a personality. Where I can always see other women who are they get to half tank, they're like, oh no, I got to pull over. I got to get gas. And I'm not that girl.
I'm right there with you. I'm definitely the okay, I think I have 13 miles left. I can go do this one errand and then go to the gas station. That's 100% me too. But I love that analogy too because I think a lot of women, this one probably applies to men too. I'm just obviously a female myself, more familiar with females. And I think all too often there is this message around if we slow down, we might not be able to regain momentum. Or if we slow down, I've actually had a client message me before she joined in. She was like, I'm actually afraid to slow down because what if I enjoy it too much?
That is a true thing where, my ladies feel guilty. I feel guilty that I'm just sitting here on the couch.
You've literally been taught that it's selfish.
Yeah. Then I'm just sitting here on the couch.
I actually don't think that I don't actually think now. It took me a long time to wrap my head around selfish not always being a bad thing. Because in my mind, the way that I have flipped the script is if I can't pour into other people unless I've poured into myself, then it's actually more selfish of me to not take the time for myself because now I'm negatively affecting literally everyone around me if I'm running on E. And that has been such a huge shift. Now there's a lot of different ways to kind of tweak and reframe it. And it's very commonly something that I work through with clients because there is this pervasive message of this, if you slow down, if you take time for yourself, then it's selfish. No, you have to put other people first. No, you have to right. And there has this been overarching societal ingrained message in us to go, to serve, to give. But if you've ever taken the time, so the kind of light bulb came on for me when it was after my dad passed. Grief slammed me so much that it was, when you have the whispers from the universe and then you have the 2x4 to the back of the head and then you get run over by the car kind of situation.
And then finally you're
that's what this felt like. I could look in hindsight.
You're like, yep. I think they were trying to get my attention.
Grief forced me to slow down.
Yeah.
Yes. And it even when grief was hitting and I had to look, I was in such chronic fight or flight, such chronic stress for 30 years that when grief slammed me, it took me a while to wrap my head around. I had to drop to part-time with benefits and then part-time without benefits to even create the space for myself. That's how much I really think God's source, whatever you believe in, God was no, and just smacked me down. I told you to sit, you haven't listened for 30 years, you're going to now. And it really was this aha moment because after I did slow down, after I actually started unraveling some of this and doing the self-care and pouring into myself in various ways, what's interesting, so I was a clinician. I'm a doctor of physical therapy by trade. I did that for well over a decade. And this happened about 6 or 7 years into treating. And when I came back into the clinic while I was doing the self-care work, I had patients that had been with me for years and they were like, I don't know what's changed. Like, I know most of them knew about my dad. They're like, I know you went through a hard time, but something about you is different. And you know how I know is that I'm feeling better faster and I don't know why. Like, I was getting better patient outcomes significantly the more that I actually prioritized self-care. And that's been true too now, moving into coaching and doing the retreats and the alignment business coaching that I do now, is I can tell the difference in my energy and how I show up when I let it slide, when I don't practice what I preach on self-care versus when I do. Yeah. And just how I'm able to show up and the level to which their transformations are able to happen.
It's interesting because I think like exactly what you said. Like, I was the same way. I was a go, go, go kind of person. Like, hustle was my spirit animal. And I've, again, got hit by the 2x4 just like you did, and just had this like literally like wanted to burn everything to the ground moment. And now as I see people running towards that brick wall, you want to like pull them back and just be like, that wall sucks. Because it's like, you don't know how, like, it took me a good like 6 months to get off the floor after I hit the wall. And it's like, like, and I can't tell you, and like, I keep trying to explore like what it took for me to get to that place, but also what took me to like get back up off the floor. But you see that person on the same path that you were, and you're just like, girlfriend. And they're just so caught in their like, their stuff that they can't see that like,
yeah, it's a blind spot.
Out. Yeah.
And we all have blind spots, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for the other person being willing and ready to accept and shift. But also that's where I do think it is so important to have the mirror, to have the guide. And this is bringing up something. So I think it's important to allow yourself to trigger other people.
Yes.
Because who am I to say that me saying something, right? Like this has actually happened at speaking engagements before. I will come into groups and run journal workshops and speaking engagements. And I was running a journal workshop last year in January, or this year, I guess, in January. And I did some hot seat coaching. And one of the women was talking about how she had this pattern with her employees on not doing what she wanted them to and pushing back and all these different things. And in the hot seat coaching, I kind of intentionally triggered her, because it's not my responsibility what she does with that trigger. My responsibility is to tell my truth. And if someone is asking me for coaching in that way, I am going to point out very lovingly and with a lot of compassion. To be honest, I think I said something along the lines of like, okay, if you look at all of these scenarios, what's the common denominator? Her. How are you communicating with them? Right? How can we shift that communication so that the expectations are more clear? Clear is kind. Right? Well, actually, I don't know the actual percentages. I'm not even going to try to make up percentages. Sometimes that will be all the person needs to be like, oh, okay, yes, I see, right? If they're really willing and ready. However, there are going to be those moments where you're going to trigger someone and they go on the defensive. And I just put my hands up and I was like, I totally get where you're coming from. And what you do with that information is on you. I want you to sit and reflect on it. Right? And all of this to say that who knows if when you trigger someone, maybe that's the thing that they need. It might not be immediate, but maybe down the road, that's the off moment.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the moment that leads them to the reflection to finally take off those blinders, to actually finally open up from those blind spots and see that there is a different way to live, that they don't have to keep with the hustle and the running into a brick wall, right? They don't have to make everything so damn hard on themselves.
Yes. It doesn't have to be perfect how it gets done. And
yeah. No one likes Little Miss Perfect anyways. Why do we keep striving for her?
It's funny. And it's like, I think about like you see, maybe it's just me and what pops up in my algorithm, but like that for me, it's a happy reminder that like, you know, we all kind of, even though we evolve, like we still fall into those patterns, but we get out of those patterns quicker because we're like, oh shoot, I'm doing it again. And you're just like, and you have the tools to recognize that you are in that pattern and to be able to shift out of that pattern. But I do, you know, like the universe gives me that whisper of like, you know, those perfectionist quotes or something else about perfection. But you know, when you're stuck in perfection, you just think that's how life is.
Yes. And honestly, 9 times out of 10, I think perfectionism is just procrastination in a pretty wrapping.
Partly that, you know, if especially for women who diet, they're like, well, if, you know, I could just stack the blocks just so, then I would be able to lose the weight.
Yeah, that makes me think of prior to COVID, the number of times that people would say, if I just had the time.
Yes, they still do it.
And then COVID happened. Now, granted, I was in the camp of an essential provider. So like, I definitely didn't have
like nothing changed in my life.
Nothing changed. In fact, like my workload went up because I hadn't like pivoted out of healthcare at that point. But so many people, and I remember seeing all the memes of like, well, this showed us this was a lie. Like I have the time and I'm still not doing it. And so a lot of perfectionism. So I already said like it's often procrastination wrapped up in a pretty package and something that's a little bit more acceptable that we can almost wear as a badge of honor.
Yes.
It's also protection for our ego.
Yeah.
So our ego drives the ship more than we would like to admit. And it's a constant thing to kind of be able to recognize and keep your ego in check and tell the difference between the self and the ego and which one is talking and which one is driving the bus. And when I catch myself back in perfectionism, it typically is because my ego is now wanting to be in control and to be quote unquote right about something. So whether or not, like I've noticed this recently come up when I got triggered, like my abandonment wound got triggered. And so then I turned into perfectionistic tendencies with a couple different things that I was doing because my ego is now trying to control the situation to be like, okay, well, right, like those old patterns from when I was a kid that if I am better, if I do all the right things, then I won't be left. I'll be found worthy of love. Right. Yeah. When the person who, like my partner didn't intend to trigger me. He was just staying in his truth and is not going to abandon me. But that's what my ego said. And then my ego responded with perfectionism until I was like, wait, right? Because now I have the tools to be like, ooh, I'm doing it again. Okay, let's sit and reflect on where this is coming from. And you talked about it, professional triggered like your abandonment, but I also feel like for a lot of the women that I work with, perfectionism, like there's a lot of things in their life they can't control. But this piece, so you try to find control somewhere.
This is the piece that I can control.
That is so common.
All the other, it could be multiple areas are out of control, but this little piece right here, I got this. And it's part ego and part just like, I need to own something. Like I need something that doesn't feel chaotic to me.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's such a good point because there is a way, I truly think that there is a way to do that in a healthy, truly embodying wellness kind of way. And it's when we go past the edge, when it's like, okay, there's controlling what I can control. And then there's forcing control outside of those bounds just enough. So now it turns into perfectionism.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I see here. And so then it turns into this, everything else must fall into this same place that my job, my kids, this all must have some form of control, which, as we've been alluding to, leads to this burnout because you've put these expectations that you need to be, super mom, super, woman at the office, super spouse, super insert all the things you're trying to be super at.
Yep. And you end up just leaking your own energy and your time all over the place because you're trying to do all these different things that really it honestly just leads to more frustration because, again, you can't control it. And the more you try to control it, the more the universe and the other people involved are going to push back, or it's not going to go in the direction that you want it to 9 times out of 10. Like, that rarely works. And this can be something as simple as like trying to intervene in your kid's job search, or trying to be the peacemaker. This is the one I see a lot because it's well intentioned, right? Being the peacemaker between family members or friends, right? Like that's not you. Let it go.
I see that a lot between the mother child and partner, that, someone is the bridge, that like, if it's the mother and the child that doesn't get along, then the spouse becomes the bridge, and vice versa, and or in-laws. And like, if you're that bridge, like at some point your structure is just gonna fall into the river. So as people are like listening to this and they're kind of starting to be like, if we've triggered you, I'm gonna apologize but not apologize. Because I bring people on this because I know what I felt, and I felt like shit. And I didn't know at the time, like, you don't know what you don't know at the time. And so I didn't know that, one, I was on the fast track to burnout. 2, I didn't know I was burnt out. I just was like, I just had no for anything that I wanted to do in my life.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was like. I didn't think it was what I was doing. I thought it was everything, not like a specific thing. But I know that you have a tool that you work with women who kind of might be like, oh my God, I know that feeling of like, I'm doing this, I go to work every day, but why? Or, I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah. So that's really like in the grand scheme of things, like that's what I do. And first up, I want to circle back to the first thing you said with like the trigger and apologize, not apologize. And very quickly just say that like, really it comes down to taking radical responsibility for what you can control and your part in it, but then also allowing and opening up space for them to take radical responsibility. And then allowing the chips to fall where they may, right? Like if you trigger somebody, absolutely apologize, take radical responsibility, but also allow them to take the onus and release any expectation on the outcome that you may have. They may not take onus, and that's okay, right? Then you just have to decide where you stand in that. So, and then speaking to burnout and finding your path, finding what that something more is for you, and getting really clear, right? Like, especially if you're the person who's a multi-passionate and you have all these different ideas, and to the point where it's almost like this mental fog is created because there's so many different possibilities, but then you often end up just kind of staying along the path that you know because there isn't clarity through this mental fog of all the different things. Like, that's what I do, is help you. Like, it's not confusion. It's just all of the conditioning and all the expectations clouding the way for you to get to the clarity. So what I do I call them my 180 sessions, and it's really break down with a lot of really deep reflective questions and prompts. Again, I'm not any kind of guru. I'm just the guide. I'm the giant mirror that can hold up, allow you to see clearly through that fog now onto really what is my path? What's my aligned path? How do I break up with burnout? And what are the various things internally that I need to have clicked into place that I've gotten a little off on in order to be able to actually move down my aligned path, right? Because if our internal environment is chaotic, we're not going to be able to create the external environment we want. Period.
Right.
So my sessions really are kind of 2 things. It's one, getting really clear, super clear on what your path is and what the next like 3 to 5 action steps are that will make massive launches towards it. But then also dealing with, okay, what habits, what boundaries do you need in place, both internal and external, to create the internal environment that will actually allow you to then take these steps?
Yeah. and as you talk about, like boundaries, earlier you talked about how like, put your non-negotiables and like, box them into your calendar. For a lot of women, boundaries are just a challenge, because it's like, I put it up and it's like a wall, it's like a wall of paper, it's like, I put it up, but like pretty much anything could bash through that paper barrier.
Yeah. That's where I think it's really important to know your why behind the boundary. Like, what's the result that I'm going for? Or why do I have this in place? If you don't know that deeply, yeah, you're going to move it for any little thing. It's going to become an inconvenience versus, so like even the boundary of, I'm going to go with a relatively easy one, like the boundary that, okay, I'm going to walk outside for 10 minutes every single day. We'll just come up with like a fairly basic one for an internal boundary. And I have it set on my calendar. That's a boundary. No one talks to me from, I don't know, 3 p.m. to 3:10. Like that's my walk time. And if I know that 10 minutes of walking, right? So 3 p.m. is very commonly when people start to kind of go on autopilot in the afternoon or feel like they want a break. So something like a 10-minute walk, okay, I know that if I do that, I will feel like I get a second wind. It will boost my energy. I will increase my productivity. If I need to be productive, if I need to be creative, it will increase creativity. Like what does it do for me? If I don't know that, I'm going to move that. I'm going to just scroll on Instagram. I'm going to allow myself to just like sink into the couch and eat popcorn, or I'm going to try to push through work when I would do so much better if I just took 10 minutes to go walk outside and then got back to work.
Right.
Right. Like, have you ever found that moment where you like fight yourself? Like you're like, no, I have to get through this work stuff. It's not actually like productive energy. Like you would do so much better if you just took a break and came back. You'd crush the same amount of work in like a third of the time.
It's so much, I've been on my own little like challenge, my own little personal challenge with my steps. And the other day I was sitting here and it was like I look out the window, it was starting to get dark and I was like, oh, I told myself I was going in 10 minutes. Oh, I told myself I was going in 10 minutes. And, I have the luxury of like, I don't have someone who's clocking my time. Like, I don't have like a boss who's going to be like, girl, you're away from your desk. Like, what were you thinking?
It's almost harder as an entrepreneur because you don't have anyone else checking you.
Actually, honestly, well, for all my old employers, it was a lot easier when I was employed because I was like, gonna miss me. but now, my current boss, she could be a little bit of a hard ass.
Same. Mine's yeah.
She could be a little judgmental. So I was sitting here in my pajamas and I was like, I don't want to get dressed. And I was like, screw it. I literally went outside and just put a coat on and I went for a 10-minute walk in my pajamas. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, and it was like, that was for me, like my, like, I just jumped the Grand Canyon because I was like, okay, that's my thing. Like, if I can just get out for 10 minutes, nothing like burned down in my 10 minutes that I was gone. Mm-hmm. And I got 2,000 steps. Like,
yep.
Done.
Yeah. It's those little things. And one thing that you pointed to is like, there was something that you didn't want to do that was in your mind a prerequisite for getting the 10-minute walk done, when really, so this is something that I tell clients all the time, is if you find yourself stuck or putting something off, one is, how can this feel easier for me right now? And two, how can this feel more fun? Right? Like, who cares if you go walk around in your pajamas? You know how many times I walk around my neighborhood in my bathrobe? Because it's cozy and I like it. And I don't want to put actual clothes on. Like, how can this feel easier? And how can this feel more fun? That allows your brain to kind of strip away some of the shoulds and some of like how you've been told things have to be done, or some weird expectation that you placed on it that you didn't even realize, right? Like, it allows all that to kind of strip away and for you to think outside the box of like, how can I just keep this promise to myself of taking the next step?
And that really, the easy barrier was all I needed was because I was like, I don't want to get dressed. Like, it was just like the hassle of getting dressed. And I'm like, screw it. I'm not getting dressed, because how many people are looking out their window and be like, oh, I think she's in her pajamas. I don't think I don't even know. I don't think I even ran to
And
a
if they are, you probably just gave them permission
to do it still. Like, oh.
Yep.
You know,
like, wait, I want to go for a walk. No, I don't have to get dressed. She's doing it.
Right. And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, do your pajamas really look like pajamas?
I went to an event the other night and legitimately wore my pajama pants because they had this floral print on them. And I was like, these could totally pass for something.
Right. And everyone's probably like,
got so many compliments on them.
Yeah. They were like, oh, cool pants.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can this feel easier? How can this feel more fun? I think are two really key things. And then reminding yourself. So if someone's listening and you're like trying to start a new habit, hold a new boundary with yourself. So it does take a while, right? Holding a new boundary is equivalent to a new habit. It takes like 21 days or 21 reps minimum for it to really start to hold. And so how can this feel easier? How can this feel more fun? Remembering your why is key. And then also, to a certain extent, just saying like, okay, I told myself I was going to do this. I'm going to hold this promise to myself. Because if I can't keep this promise to myself, how am I running the rest of my life, right? Like, that's the verbiage that I use in my head, because I remind myself how you do the small things is how you do everything. So if I can't hold this little promise to myself, what message am I telling internal me that I can't be trusted? Well, that's like, I literally have trust tattooed on my thumb as a reminder to continuously show up for myself and hold even the little promises to myself. And then as you get the reps in, it will become easier and easier. Because like you said, you got back from your walk and you're like, I feel so much better. I got these steps in. It's a dopamine hit for you to keep a promise to yourself. Right? So all these little things, and the caveat for anyone listening, please don't try to start like 5 new boundaries at once.
Oh my God. Yes.
One at a time.
I know.
One at a time.
Do you know how many times?
If you try to do all of them, it's going to turn into the spinning plate or like the running all the burners on hot thing, and it's all going to burn and crash. Like, one at a time.
So many times I will, start new clients and I'm like, okay, you know what? I have a thing called non-negotiables, and I just want you to pick like 1 to 3, like challenging but doable things. And then I get back like a list, and I was like,
you're like, I said 1 to 3.
Right.
That's me all the time with my clients, because one of the challenges that I give almost all of them is to every night brain dump everything that's in your head, especially the to-do list, like the things that are running through your brain of like what you have to get done the next day, the next week. Pick your top 3. You're going to have 3 needle movers on your to-do list for the next day and nothing else. And they're like, but I'm like, no, 3.
Yeah. Or
you can have a nice to-do list that you can get to if you have time, but your to-do list has 3.
But their one thing is like paint the whole house. Like,
yeah. I'm like, okay.
You're not going to paint your whole damn house.
I hear you, because this was me with the 20 plus item to-do list in the past. And your side note, like actually very relevant note, like your to-do list is also a promise. Like, we have ingrained ourselves to believe like the to-do list is little promises that I will get this done today. So when you make it 20 plus things long, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. Make it 3. Like, what are the 3 things that if your head hits the pillow the next night, you will feel really good about getting those things done? What's truly going to move the needle?
Right. And 3 realistic things, because it's like no one, not even the best house painter can paint their house in a day.
If you're going to paint your whole house, you're going to end up in a PT clinic the next day, because I've actually treated those people more than once. Like, I still remember this guy coming in and I had to treat him for neck and shoulder pain from painting like just 3 rooms, not even a whole house, but 3 full rooms in a day, because his wife was mad at him and he was trying to make it up to her. And so he painted 3 different rooms and was in such pain. Like, he had racked his nervous system from having his arm overhead for that long. Like, don't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, got off on a tangent there. The PT
No,
kicked in.
I love tangents, but I'm sure other people have been like, yeah, I've done gardening or some other thing for endless hours trying to meet a unrealistic deadline. And then the next few days, I just was like toast.
Yeah.
But the other thing you do is that you host retreats. Now, is it around boundary setting? Is it around me slowing myself down? Like, what are your retreats? What are they based around?
Yeah. So I love these retreats, and it actually encompasses everything that we've talked about, right? Like, how often do we take a day for ourselves? Like a full day to really pour in and sit in reflection with community so that we can move forward. So I call them the Choose You Day Retreats. They're just a day long, and it's an opportunity to come into community, to come into sisterhood, and really sit and pour into yourself. So it always looks a little bit different, but the overarching intention is always to really recalibrate and reset your internal environment so that you feel confident and empowered and capable of truly creating the life that you want and hitting the ground running afterwards. So it's that moment where, going back to that analogy of like, if you're running on empty, this is the day to really fill the tank completely and have basically like fill your tank and create a backup tank, right? By pouring into yourself so much. And it's a mix of what we might think of as a little bit more self-care type things like breath work and yin yoga and sound healing and that kind of stuff. But then also I mix in creative workshops where you get to bring out your inner child and make messy art and allow yourself to see that like imperfection is okay. Right? Kind of prove that to yourself. And then I have workshops throughout the day that are a little bit more centered on better understanding your nervous system and how you react and how can you be more responsive versus reactive in situations. How do you approach uncomfortable conversations in a way that feels good to you? How can you, like this last one, I ran a workshop that I called Finding the Gaps. And it's a series of reflection prompts that I use to really be able to see where the gaps in how you are showing up in life and the path that you are on that are not in true alignment with that life that you would want to be reflecting on your deathbed. Like, where are the gaps there? And then we went right into a workshop on, okay, now that we know that, how can we break it down and develop the boundaries, both internal and external, that we need to actually allow us to make moves in that direction.
That sounds interesting.
So that just, yeah, it's a really beautiful day. And I've gotten so many messages. I just ran one 2 weeks ago. And even just yesterday, I got a message from someone being like, oh my gosh, like the aha moments are still like rolling in. And I felt like I've been so much more productive this week. I've been able to have better conversations with my husband. I've been able to have better conversations with my kids, and just creating this internal environment that allows you to feel calm and in control and responsive versus reactive. And when I say in control, I mean in a wholeness, holistic, like what you actually can control.
Right.
Right. Like something as simple as being able to stay really calm when life throws you a giant wrench.
Yeah. And that, nowadays there's a lot of wrenches coming at us. And it makes me think of, did you ever see the movie Dodgeball?
Yes.
And if you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball. So.
Yep. Yeah. So it really is, it's creating this internal environment. So rather than just feeling chaotic and frantic and like we need to grasp and control all the different things, really feeling centered and super clear on what our focus is right now and what our priorities are and how to use that to move the needle in the direction that we want to go. So that's, if I had to say like what the difference is, like the one-on-one sessions that I do are really individualized and help you get very clear on what your aligned path is forward and the little things that you need to create the internal environment in order to create the external. This is take a day to really pour into yourself, fill your gas tank up, and at the same time, let's start to get some clarity. Let's start to put a lot of actionable things into place. But really the focus of that is a lot more of like, hey, you don't take enough time for yourself. Let's take a day. And I love the day because I could do a lot more in like a 3-day retreat, which is a little bit more typical to see. But with doing a day, it still gives you, right? Like you're wearing a lot of hats. So then you still get that other day of the weekend, especially if you're still working a more normal 9 to 5. Like now you can still do the meal prep or just have an integration day or like whatever you need to do to take care of you and the people around you without having to take time off work and having this whole 3-day thing that now you feel amazing from. Like if anyone's gone to one of these, I did when I was a clinician. I remember coming back and be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But then having to hit the ground running with my normal job and feeling like I was behind because I hadn't prepped for the week. I hadn't done all these things, right? So that's a long-winded way of like explaining why I picked the 1 day for now.
You're right. And I feel like so many people, when you have a multi-day event, it's like all the excuses start to pop up. Like, who's going to watch my kids or my dog or my cat? Or, wow, I got to I have to have a travel day, and, all the things like pop up, where if it's just like 1 day, you could also, wrap other things around it. Like you said, an integration day. Like if it's, say you're flying to like Florida, let's just make that up. If I'm flying to Florida, it's like, okay, then I can now maybe on the backside, maybe go to a spa the next day.
Yeah. And there are a bunch that came in for this last one that like the next day went hiking and went to the pool because 2 weeks ago in Phoenix, it was still like 80 degrees during the day.
Right. So it's like I can have this day, but then also take the extra day. Like you said, I feel like a lot of us go to these like events and I fly in, I do the event. This is fabulous. And I fly home and it's in a notebook that I may or may not ever open.
I have a lot of notebooks. I have a notebook graveyard from events.
And I'm like, it's so funny. I look over at my bookshelf over there, a shit ton of notebooks. And I'm like, why do I hold on to them? Like, am I ever going to go back through it and be like, that idea from 10 years ago, this is the shit. I'm going to run it right now.
Yeah. And that's why when I go to events now, like, thankfully, I am my own boss. And while sometimes she is judgmental and rude and a hard ass, I can, like, the boss does let me take a day after those events to really actually go through those notebooks. I also recognize that not everyone has that privilege. And so that's like, I wanted to be able to almost have that built in. And I also know like, it's so hard. Like if you're not willing to set aside, if you have not been able to commit to setting aside a little bit of time for yourself every day or every week, like I don't want to launch you into 3 days.
Yeah.
Right? You are going to just fall back into the patterns because there is no integration time.
Yeah.
That's the harsh truth, but that's the truth. You'll just run right back into all the patterns. You might have a couple, right? You likely will have 1 or 2 things that does shift. You will have a giant energetic shift. But my biggest thing is how can I make this more true transformation?
Gotcha.
Everything I do is super intentional.
I love it. I love it. Now, there's one thing that I ask all of the people who come on my show. What's one thing that makes you feel magical? Any particular type of dance or just dance in general?
I hip hop dance.
Oh, nice for you. Good for you. Yay.
Yeah. But as far as the magical part, I think it's probably equal between just putting music on and just moving in the morning, which there's no choreo to that. That's my current practice of allowing myself to be imperfect and not caring what it looks like. But also I do take some choreo classes and I just feel like such a badass at the end of those. I feel magical, which actually now that I'm saying it, can I give a second answer too?
Go for it.
Sitting at on a mountain summit at sunrise or sunset. And isn't that so? I love that you asked this question, because how often when someone introduces themselves, they lead with like, here's my name and here's like my job title, right? Versus like, what makes you tick? What makes you get up in the morning? What makes you feel magical? What do you like to do for fun?
Yeah. And it's funny because I mean, for years, that's all we've just always put so much emphasis on what you do with who you are. And it's hard to like break that apart. There's a woman I've been following on TikTok recently, and she just retired, and she's like, it's been really hard because she's like, I was Susie. I was a financial planner. I'm Susie. I'm now retired. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Oh, I went through so much of that when I left the clinical world and was like, okay, if I'm not leading with I'm a doctor of physical therapy, then who am I? Right. Going back to that, like, just because you identify as something does not mean it needs to be tied into your identity.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work and a lot of power in dissolving those ties.
Yeah. And she's like, things that like, you know, I'm trying to tell, you know, not like the soon to be retired people now, like break that apart, because she's like, you leave and you're just like on this island of like misfit people. Like, well, who, like, I no longer, I'm not a financial planner anymore. Like, well, who am I? I'm just Susie.
Yep. And that's all you need to be.
And it's right? Like, it took us, she's like, it took me a year to finally be cool with like not saying like Susie retired. She's like, just be like, hey, I'm Susie. It's cool. Like, I don't need to have a comma.
Yeah. But how amazing would it feel and be if people could get to that point before having to get to retirement?
And that's what she's like, I want you to be there. Like, she's like, but when you like, you know, punch your timesheet for the last time, be able to like confidently go into retirement without feeling like, oh crap, now what? Like, I don't have to wake up and go someplace the next day.
Yeah, be really confident in who you are before having to get to retirement and being forced to release those identities. And also be really confident, be really clear on your path forward and how you're living your life without needing a major traumatic loss to like bring it to light to you.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you. And I love that. And I'm hoping that, you know, many of you have had aha moments, right? And if you've had 50 aha moments, great. Write them down. However, scan through and just intuitively what hits right now. And start working on that. And when that works its way through, come back to the list of your notebook graveyard and find out what hits again. And hopefully it's not in 10 years when you're like moving and you're like, what's this notebook? Megan, it has been absolutely fabulous having you on the show. Where can people find you on the socials?
Thank you so much, Kim. I live on Instagram mostly. I'm on all the others. Like I technically have a TikTok. I have not been great about posting on it. So Instagram's your best bet. And it's at Dr. Megan Daly. Daly is spelled like Daly. I love chatting in the DMs. It's always me. I don't use ManyChat or anything like that. So yeah. And then all of my links that are relevant are in my Instagram bio. So yeah, come on over, say hi.
And all of this information about her retreats and about the 180 and all that magical stuff will be linked in the show notes as well. So follow her. And if you had any aha moments, do me a favor. Write down what your aha moment is and make sure you tag myself and Dr. Megan. And we'd love to hear it. I love hearing when people take away something from a show. I know I take away a lot of things from a show. I'm here like writing all my notes about what I took away from this show. So Dr. Megan, thank you again for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. It was amazing.
Awesome. All right, Magic Makers, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you've made it this far, yay. I'm thinking you enjoyed the show. Let's continue the conversation on Instagram. You can find me at Kim Jefferson Coach. In order for me to keep sharing this message, do me a favor and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. New episodes are available every Wednesday. The Fit Girl Magic podcast is intended to provide you with tips, tools, and strategies that will help you make better decisions about your health. I really appreciate your feedback and your support. Thank you so much.